Okay, we're on Judges chapter 14. We continue with Samson. The first two verses, then Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So he came back and told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me as a wife. Okay, so Samson saw this gal, and apparently she's a babe. She got his attention. She's a Philistine girl. Now, Timnah was in Philistine territory at that time. And but where he was from was Zorah, an area right near Zorah here. And it was only like 5 miles away, very close. So they were right on the edge of Philistine territory anyway. But, you know, the thing about the Philistines, it's, yes, thank you. The Philistine people were not exactly listed as the forbidden people in Torah that they were not allowed to make a covenant with. In Deuteronomy 7, the first 4 verses, when Yahweh your Elohim shall bring you into the land where you're entering to possess it, and shall clear away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. And when Yahweh your Elohim shall deliver them before you, and you shall defeat them, then you shall utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, and show no favor to them. Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Excuse me, then the anger of Yahweh will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. Well, there's also, and it's very possible the Philistines maybe are a subset of one of these other peoples there. That's a possibility. However, we're also told in Exodus that don't intermarry or make a covenant with any of the peoples of Canaan. That's in Exodus 34, starting at verse 12. Watch yourself that you make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land into which you're going, lest it become a snare in your midst. But rather you are to tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, and cut down their asherim. For you shall not worship any other god, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous Elohim. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and someone invite you to eat of his sacrifice. And you take some of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and cause your sons also to play the harlot with their gods. Keep in mind, now, Paul interpreted this passage right here to mean that we are not to yoke ourselves with unbelievers of any kind. That's in, I got these slides here combined a little wrong. In 2 Corinthians 6, starting at verse 14, do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? Or what harmony has Messiah with Belial? Or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? Or what agreement has the temple of Elohim with idols? For we are the temple of the living Elohim. Just as Elohim said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I'll be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Verse 17, therefore come out from their midst and be separate, says the Master. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you'll be sons and daughters to me, says Adonai Yahweh. Well, Samson knew this also. You know he did. But he's up to something. He's got a plan. He's got a plan. He's not really going to marry this gal. Verses 3 and 4 of Judges 14. Then his father and his mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she looks good to me. However, his father and mother did not know that it was of Yahweh, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Now at that time the Philistines were ruling over Israel. Now Samson's parents knew this was against Torah, but Samson insisted on getting this Philistine woman. Samson likely knew from his previous travels and engagements with the Philistines that this girl was, what's the term, easy, okay? And that would play right into his plan. We'll get there. Okay, the passage is worded interestingly in verse 14. It says that he is seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Okay, he, and it capitalized he, and that's the word toanah, and actually it means an opportunity. Now, I don't know that Yahweh seeks an opportunity to go against somebody. When you can just make the earth swallow them up, then what do you need an opportunity for? You see, the he should be a little h. You see, it's Samson. He's looking for an opportunity to attack the Philistines. And Elohim planted this in his heart. This is what he wanted. So, let's see what he's doing here. Verses 5 and 6. Then Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and came as far as the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that he tore as one tears a kid, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or mother what he'd done. Now, this was not a strength that Samson had naturally. It says, the breath of Yahweh came upon him mightily. That's where strength comes from. And by the way, David was the same way. In 1 Samuel 17, verses 34 through 36, but David said to Saul, your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living Elohim. So you keep that in mind. David could do the same thing. And it's the strength that was given to them through the breath of the Father. Oh, okay, that could let's go to verses 7 and 8 of Judges 14. So he went down and talked to the woman, and she looked good to Samson. When he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the body of the lion. Now, we don't know how much later this was that Samson went by, but a dead body in the wilderness like that of a lion is not going to remain very long, okay? And I'm going to say that this thing was picked clean, and we had nothing but a skeleton left, because he's not allowed to touch a dead thing. That's meaning a carcass. Okay, so, and besides, why wouldn't that make more sense that bees would build hives in a skeletal type thing? Yeah. That would to me. A week or two, it's all gone. Especially in the wilderness like that. Verse 9, so he scraped the honey into his hands and went on, eating as he went. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate it. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey out of the body of the lion. Yeah.
It takes a while to make honey.
Yeah.
They had to have been there a while.
Right. They may have been there a month or two. We don't know.
Takes a minute to make a beehive.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. So I guess that just further illustrates it was a skeletal remain that we're talking about. Very good, Tom. Thank you. Well, Samson made a point not to tell his parents where that honey came from. Samson has a plan. Verses 10 and 11, then his father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there. For the young men customarily did this. And it came about when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. You know what Samson's doing? He wants to be one of the boys. Okay? It's going to be one of the boys. But, in fact, he's setting a trap. Verse 12, then Samson said to them, let me now propound a riddle to you. And by the way, as we go along here, I'm going to point out that Samson thought himself to be quite the poet. Okay? Quite the author, too. If you will indeed tell it to me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. But if you're unable to tell me, then you shall give me 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. And they said to him, propound your riddle that we may hear it. So he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. But they could not tell the riddle in 3 days. See, the riddle here is for a purpose. There's no indication that Samson needed 30 changes of clothes of the Philistines. As a matter of fact, it's probably not something he'd want to wear. There were different types of clothing. You know, it depends on what's available in the area, but the Philistines wore this, Israelites wore that. And it would be different, maybe different by tribe, but he is not really interested in Philistine garments. But so he makes a bet with them. See, it would appear here Samson's just a wild guy who likes to party and make bets. One of those guys. But he's not. He's setting this whole thing up as a way to attack the Philistines and for it to be their fault. It's going to be their fault. He's going to be justified in what he does. Verse 15. Then it came about on the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband that he may tell us the riddle, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us to impoverish us? Is this not so? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, you only hate me. You do not love me. You propounded a riddle to the sons of my people and have not told it to me. And he said to her, behold, I have not told it to my father or mother, so should I tell you? However, she wept before him 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came about on the 7th day that he told her because she pressed him so hard. She told the riddle to the sons of her people. You know, Samson's betrothed wife pressed him very hard. He told her that he didn't tell anyone, didn't tell mom or dad. Samson knew the Philistines pressured her. And Samson knew if the Philistines got it right, they would know where they got it from. Verse 18. So the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. Samson said that if they had not messed with his newly betrothed wife-to-be, they would not have solved his riddle. And Samson is making a direct allegation when he says, you've been plowing with my heifer. That's definitely suggests Samson knew that she was messing with some of the Philistine village boys. Yeah.
The way they answered the riddle, I was told that young boys that are being taught by a rabbi, when he asked them questions, instead of them answering like what's 2 plus 2, they'll say 4. You know, when the rabbis that really understand it, they'll come back with a question. What is the square root of 4? You know, 16. That's exactly what they did. He asked the question.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And that was a method of teaching the students.
Method of learning. Okay. Interesting. Well, verses 19 and 20. So the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of them and took their spoil and gave the changes of clothes to those who told the riddle. His anger burned, and he went up to his father's house, but Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his friend. Well, the Spirit of Elohim came upon him mightily. He killed 30 Philistines in Ashkelon. Why? Because they were messing with his wife. It's not his fault. They're messing with his wife. They're asking for it. He never quite married her yet, though. They're just betrothed. Because he went home without her, by the way. And this friend of Samson, he stayed in Timnah, so he was probably a Philistine. We talked about how long he was probably there. Remember, for the lion to just be a skeleton, and for the honey to be there. He's there being a part of the guys for a long time, weeks, months, before he went back. So they gave his wife, his dad, her dad gave his daughter, Samson's wife, to be to a friend instead. Judges 15, verse 1. But after a while, in the time of wheat harvest, it came about that Samson visited his wife with a young goat and said, I will go into my wife in her room. But her father did not let him enter. Okay. Why would Samson go back to Timnah to get his wife if this alleged marriage was all a setup that he orchestrated? The key to the event here is that little feller on the right, the goat. That's the key to this strange event. Samson is bringing her a goat. And when I first was looking at this, I thought, why is he bringing her a goat? There's a reason for that. You know, a goat happens to be, now where is she from? Where does she live? What's the name of the town? Timnah. It just so happens the price of a prostitute in Timnah is a goat. Okay? That's historical. It's in Genesis 38, starting at verse 13. And this is about Judah and Tamar, the whole thing between those two. You think Samson knew about Genesis? Oh, yes, he did. He was brought up on it. All of the Torah. It was told to Tamar, behold, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to shear his sheep. Now, do you remember the story here? Judah had a son, and he marries Tamar, and Elohim sees evil in him, and he kills him. And in following with the Levirate law, as we saw in loving Leah and what it says in Torah, he has to give, his son is now supposed to be betrothed to this woman. And the son looked at the situation and knew that the firstborn son wasn't going to be his, and that he's going to have to split his his inheritance. Yes, going to have to split it now. The first son is going to be considered the first son's son, his brother's son. So his inheritance is going to be split. So it says he, spilled his seed on the ground. And Elohim said, no, he killed him. So now he has this other son, his third son. And he tells Tamar, he said, now he's not old enough to marry yet. But when he does, we'll come get you. You go back and live with your dad in Timnah. So she does that. And she doesn't hear. Years go by. Doesn't hear from him. In the meantime, Judah's wife dies. And apparently getting lonely. Okay, so he goes down to Timnah to shear his sheep. In verse 14, so she removed her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil and wrapped herself. All this time, she was a proper woman. She was wearing widow's garments all that time. Sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. That's that last son. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. Verse 16, so he turned aside to her by the road and said, here now, let me come in to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, therefore I will send you a kid from the flock. That's a goat, by the way. She said, moreover, will you give a pledge until you send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give you? And she said, your seal and your cord and your staff that's in your hand. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So old Judah, it's been a while, sees the gal standing there by the road and says, how much? She says, it's a goat. And it cost a little goat. And she says, okay, I don't see a goat on you. So how do I know you're going to bring me a goat? And he says, well, what do you want? So, Judah, he's ready. So she says, okay, I want your credit cards and your driver's license. And he says, fine. And that's what he gives her. That's his seal, his cord, and his staff, and all has his insignia on it. And he went into her, she conceived. So Judah goes back, and then he hears that daughter-in-law that he did not want his last son to marry is pregnant. She's a harlot. So he goes down to Timnah and says, she's pregnant, burn her, because you burned the daughter of a priest that is engaged in harlotry. And she says, well, let me show you who knocked me up. Goes and gets his staff and his cord and his seal. Says, here, this is the guy that did it. And he says, she's better than I am. And that's true. She is more righteous than he is. She's a better person. You know, just before that, Judah tried to get that stuff back. He had a buddy of his that owed him a huge favor. I mean, it was a huge favor. And he said, hey, do me a favor. Go to Timnah with this goat. Find the temple prostitute. Get my signet, my seal, and my staff back. Okay? He said, fine. After this, we're even, okay? So he goes down to Timnah with his goat. And he walks around town saying, where's the temple prostitute? And they say, we don't have a temple prostitute. Are you sure? Oh, yeah, we're sure. So he goes back with the goat. And Judah says, fine, forget it. And then it ends. He finds out he has a child on the way. So you can see the price of a prostitute in Timnah is a goat. So, if you'll keep in mind here, just in verse 18 of chapter 40, so the men of the city said to him on the 14, on the seventh day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? He said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. Well, if this view of Samson is correct, and I'm sure it is, Samson treated his enemies with complete disdain and very clever contempt. While not being blazingly crude as Samson, Yeshua also treated his enemies the same way. So he walks up to his dad's house, to her dad's house, and says, visited his young wife with the goat, I will go into my wife. I will go into my wife in her room. I brought my goat. So,
That's a pretty good insult.
that's a heck of an insult. And that's exactly what he wanted to do. And her father said, I really thought you hated her intensely. Well, yeah. She's a harlot. So I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please let her be yours instead. Her father gave her to a companion of Samson's. It was probably one of those Philistine friends, that he made. The fact that the man was in Timnah and stayed there after Samson killed 30 Philistines tells you he wasn't really a good friend at all, but probably just another Philistine. Judging by this reaction, I'd say her father was scared to death of Samson. And I'd say rightly so. So he says, here, take the younger daughter, she's prettier. And he says, no, she is not worth a goat. I want my wife is worth a goat. That's the one I want. Yes. Verse 3, Samson then said to them, this time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. Samson didn't want to destroy the Philistines without reason. He wanted to have good reason. Well, he did it. Samson was seeking an occasion against the Philistines, an opportunity. And that's what he did. Samson felt like his actions were perfectly justified against the Philistines. First of all, they messed around with his wife. A group of them did. Then they took his wife and gave her to another man. And he just, whether it's manufactured rage or not, that's the last straw. Verses 4 and 5, and Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned the fox's tail turned the fox's tail to tail, put one torch in the middle between two tails. When he had set fire to the torches, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning up both the shocks and the standing grain, along with the vineyards and the groves. So these were probably jackals, though, not foxes. In case anyone, feels bad about cute little foxes, it was probably jackals. No one likes jackals. He probably had some help from the other Israelites catching all these jackals, getting 300 of them. They probably used nets to catch them. With the torches tied to two tails of foxes, they would run erratically through the fields before they themselves were consumed. Verse 6, then the Philistines said, who did this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his companion. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. You know, I don't know if the Philistines knew of Torah, but, you know, I told you about a priest's daughter. That may have been a custom in that area too. Leviticus 21:9, also the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by harlotry, she profanes her father, she shall be burned with fire. Since her father helped perpetrate the harlotry, he was burned also. Verses 7 and 8, and Samson said to them, since you act like this, I will surely take revenge on you, but after that I'll quit. And he struck them ruthlessly with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock of Edom. And then he came back, more rage. You killed her and her dad. Well, I'm not putting up with this. Okay? He knew all along everything that was likely to happen. And he went to Edom, which is on the other side of Zorah, which is where his parents were from. Verse 9, then the Philistines went up and camped in Judah and spread out in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come against us? And they said, we've come up to bind Samson in order to do to him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you've done to us? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. You see, that's why he had to be so clever with this. He said, I'm not doing anything to them they didn't do to me. They messed with my family. What do you expect me to do? And the other people of Judah were afraid. They didn't want the Philistines coming down on them. They didn't want Samson to give them reason to come down on them. That's why he had to come up with something, and he did. Verses 12 and 13, they said to him, we've come down to bind you so that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear to me that you will not kill me. And they said to him, no, but we will bind you fast and give you into their hands, yet surely we will not kill you. Then they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. The men of Judah were too scared. They felt like they had to hand over their bravest guy. Samson was willing to be handed over to the Philistines, but he told the men of Judah, now you guys don't kill me. He trusts them. And notice how many guys show up to take Samson, 3,000 men. Verse 14, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dripped from his hands. So the Philistines cheered with joy when they saw that the man they were getting, Samson, was being delivered to them. They thought that was great. But you know, getting your prayers answered is not always a good thing. And it wasn't for these guys. Verse 15, and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he reached out and took it and killed 1,000 men with it. I think the cheers dissipated real quick. He killed 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. And he made an ass out of the Philistines too. He's good. Verses 16 and 17, then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. And it came about when he finished speaking that he threw the jawbone from his hand. He named the place Ramoth Lehi. Okay, here. I told you, Samson, he thinks he's a poet. Okay, he thinks he's a poet. So he takes this and he killed 1,000 Philistines, and he makes a little ditty out of it. Now this is it. In Hebrew, it's almost the same word. Donkey and heaps is almost the same word. So he thought it was real clever, made a cute little poem to commemorate this event. And Ramoth Lehi here, and he called the place Ramoth Lehi. That means the lifting of the jawbone. The lifting up of the jawbone. Verses 18 and 19. Then he became very thirsty, and he called to Yahweh and said, you have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. Now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? But Elohim split the hollow that is in Lehi so that water came out of it. When he drank, his strength returned and he revived. Therefore he named it En-Hakkor, which is in Lehi to this day. Killing 1,000 Philistines with a bone would be a lot of hard work, even for a man like Samson. He named the place the lifting of the jawbone. He renames it En-Hakkor, which is a reference to him wanting independent. Now, here that's all he needed was water for his strength to revive. Elohim provides strength for his people in Scripture many times. In Isaiah 41, verses 17 and 18, the afflicted and needy are seeking water, but there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst. I, Yahweh, will answer them myself. As the Elohim of Israel, I will not forsake them. I will open rivers on the bare heights and springs in the midst of valleys. I'll make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land fountains of water. And lastly, for chapter 15, so he judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Samson only judged southwest Israel, actually, but those days are soon to come to an end. Any questions on Samson so far?
Apparently it wasn't against the law to kill Muslims back then.
Well, he was justified. They were messing with his wife. Then they killed his wife and his future father-in-law. I mean,
That was the towel heavy had a hole in the picture.
well, yeah, with the picture.
So would the jawbone not constitute as being a dead animal?
Bone. See, you're going to get a little dead Philistine on you.
I looked it up, the carcass, and it said new beehive, it's just a blog, so it's not real credible, but about 6 weeks.
Okay, that makes sense to me because he wanted to blend in with the Philistines. He wanted to find out about them. He wanted to learn about them. He wanted to get some details. He also wanted to set him up to start messing with his wife. So he's a very intelligent individual, and I don't think he's given enough credit by a lot of people in what he did. People think he was just a big skirt-chasing galoot with a lot of strength. No, there's a lot more to him than that. Granted, he was a skirt chaser too, but. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Okay, let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word, and we thank you especially once again for these wonderful appointed times you've given us and the great fellowship that we've had with one another. Once again, we pray that you do write your Torah on our hearts and minds. That is how we're drawn closer to you. And may Yahweh bless us and keep us. And may Yahweh make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. And may Yahweh lift up his countenance upon us and give us shalom. Amen.